The number 100 has multiple connotations. In the last episode, we talked about how 100 is the 100-point score. But today's number 100 is going to be a very special number indeed. It is one number which, whether you're the CEO or whether you're a fresher, whether you're 20 years old, 40 years old, 60 years old, doesn't matter. Everyone has the same. Did you guess it right? It's actually the number of active hours in a week. And today we're going to talk about time. Welcome to episode 13 of the One Life Theory podcast. My name is Rajiv. Today is going to be one of the anchor episodes of this whole series again, after the four aspects over the last few episodes. Today we're going to talk about time. And just as I started this episode, everyone has 100 active hours in a week, irrespective of the background. But how do I get to that 100 number? I'm going to give a small history to get to that 100 number, right? So if you look at time overall, the universe is, let's say, 13 billion years old. The earth is 4.5 billion years old. They're all such big numbers, like what the PM announced as a package, the number of zeros you can't even count. Even humankind, the Homo sapiens, is around 200,000 years old. And all our religions, all that we celebrate is just 2,000 to 4,000 years old. You are going to have an average lifespan of around 80 years. And so that's sort of the premise of where literally time for you is, right? And 80 in a span of 13 billion or 4 billion is literally like a microsecond, right? And the universe is going to live for far more billions of years. And you actually come and go within a microsecond for the universe. And within that microsecond, we have 80 years, which is that microsecond. And that 80 years, we're going to divide into multiple chunks. And I'm going to talk about 5 chunks which you can divide. And each of the chunk comes with its own different ways in which you plan, the way in which you see life during that chunk. So I'm going to talk about the 5 chunks in the next part of this episode. So if you consider our life of 80 years as one big epic or one big story, you divide the story into chapters. So I'm going to start with the first chunk of time, which is a chapter which can exist anywhere from 3 to 5 years. Sometimes it can go on for even 7 to 10 years. But I would say we divide life into 3 to 5 year chapters. And even 3 to 5 year chapters are more for you to draw up a very high level life plan, because I don't think any of us can predict beyond a day or a week in reality. So a 3 to 5 year is just more for you to get an idea of what you really want this chapter to be. How do you want to write this chapter of your story? So that's the first chunk of time. Next, you divide that into multiple quarters, and a quarter is a great number because literally the business world operates in quarters. 90 days is a good time period to affect any change behavior. So a quarter is a good time of 90 to 100 days, where you divide that quarter, for some time for planning and the rest of the quarter for execution. And that is the second chunk of time that, you could divide life into. A quarter also helps if you want to plan any travel to get your visa and stuff, right? The third chunk of time is literally a week. A quarter has approximately, let's say, 13 weeks. And if you divide that as 1 week for planning and 1 or 2 weeks for vacation, that still gives you 10 to 11 weeks of absolutely, crazy focus, right? In whatever you do. So a week is a great start also because, it gives you enough time to balance out stuff amongst the 4 aspects of life, because it's very difficult to balance that out at a day-to-day level. But a week gives a broad time period where you can balance out, right? That's the third chunk of time. Then a day is the fourth chunk of time, because you wake up to a fresh day, and even if you have a bad or a good day within a week, you can hope to fix it the next day when you wake up. A day has 24 hours but 16 active hours, because you're going to give up 8 hours in sleep and chores and all of that stuff, right? So a day is the fourth chunk of time. And a day is divided into hours and this particular moment, right? And that's the fifth chunk of time, which is a specific hour. The activity that you plan at your calendar is for a specific hour. Maybe you have 2 activities planned for an hour or 3 activities, but that you slot at an hour level. So these are the 5 chunks of time, and I'm going to come in the next part of this episode as to how you're going to be looking at it. I'll repeat. First is a chapter, which is 3 to 5 years, can go up to as much as 10 years. Sometimes it's much shorter because the chapter is not going as per your plan. Number 2 is a quarter, and multiple quarters make up a chapter. Number 3 is week. A week is a great start, and a week is an anchor time period I'm going to talk about. Fourth is a day. It gives you a fresh start. And fifth is an hour. These are 5 chunks of time. So what's so special about this week and an hour, right? A week has 168 hours, right? And that's plain math. It's 24 into 7. And everyone gets that many number of hours. Now, if you subtract the time we sleep, let's say I give maybe 6.5 to 7 hours of sleep every day, which is what a regular human being should get. That's 7 into 7 gone, right? Approximately 48. So you subtract 48 from 168. That's 120 hours left. Now, in these 120 hours left, I'm going to sort of subtract maybe 45 minutes a day for your physical exercise, 45 minutes a day for all the eating that you do, 45 minutes a day for just mental rest and, meditation and all that, and 45 minutes a day for all your chores, right? Taking bath, getting ready, all of that stuff. If you subtract all these 45-minute slots, you actually have to subtract 5 hours a week into 4 times. So that's 20 hours gone. So you're going to subtract 20 hours of very essential stuff that every human has to do, right? So you subtract 20 from 120, that gives you 100 hours. So exactly this 100 hours is what every one of us has. It does not matter what age you are, because if you're older, you probably need to spend more time on your physical activity and stuff. You could be a kid, you could be, college going student, you could be an adult who has just started up, you could be someone who's 40 years old like me. Every one of us has these 100 hours to divide between 3 aspects of life primarily: your service, which is your work; your social, which is the time you spend with your relationships; and your senses, all the time that you spend on your hobbies and interests. And these 100 hours have to be allocated amongst these 3. I'm going to talk about this part in the next episode, where how you prioritize, how you divide time based on the anchor or the axis of life you take. But for now, you remember that these 100 hours is all every one of us has to divide amongst 3 big aspects of life. So if you see the 100 hours, you can do some very simple math, right? In a chapter, you pretty much have, let's say, 5 years. And 5 years is 5 into 50, 250 weeks. So you have 25,000 hours. That's it. Active hours in the next 4-5 years. If you even take a decade, that's 50,000 active hours. If you take just this year, that's just 5,000 hours, right? So, if you look at life as hours, then you suddenly realize, hey, I have so many hours. But the point is not to sound fatalistic. The point is not to alarm you that there are only so many hours. If you look at the next, let's say, 2 decades of your life or 4 decades of your life, if you're 40. But to say that, hey, if you look at everything in hours, then what is it that you're doing about this particular hour that you're living, right? And can you live in that moment? And the whole part there about living in the moment is 3 things. One is, are you doing some activity in that moment completely by choice, right? You have full freedom to be able to do that activity that you should be doing. It could be any aspect of life. On that activity, are you going in with absolute full effort, with full intent, with absolutely no baggage from the past? Are you going and putting in that effort that's required to do justice to that particular activity you're doing at that particular point in time, right? And 3, are you developing the love for doing that activity? Because not all activities by default have that love. For example, exercise or doing some work which you are just have to do, right? And you can't escape it. Because if you don't develop love over at least a longer time period, you're always going to feel stressed about doing that activity. So any and everything that you do, whether it's your exercise, whether it's something that you love, obviously you love it. But if there's something that you don't like as much, you still have to develop love for it, because that's the only way that you're going to sustain that activity over a longer duration. If you're able to do all of these 3, then you live in that moment in a absolutely present manner, and you will live your one life. Living your one life is about living this present moment with full choice, absolutely putting that intent and effort and loving that moment. So that's this episode, what I wanted to talk about time. It's a massive anchor, and I'm going to summarize this in the next episode, where I'm going to talk about priorities and 6 possible ways in which you can anchor your life and how your time split happens based on those priorities.